guys? It's your boy Jalen here on another episode of Elevated Minds. We got a special guest here today. We got Dr. Sammie Scales with us, man. And we got a good episode for y'all today. So I just want my man's over here to go ahead and just introduce himself and just tell a little bit about your background and, you know, just introduce yourself to the people.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. I'm Dr. Scales. Originally from Mississippi. Left out of Mississippi in '86 after high school. Went into the Navy, and from the Navy went to Florida. Was stationed in Florida. Lived there for 12 years. Then I came back here to San Diego. Didn't like the kind of jobs that I had here, and decided to go back to school. So I went to City College. I got 3 AA degrees from City College.
Nice.
One in English, one in behavioral science, and one in transfer studies.
Okay.
Then I went to San Diego State, got a bachelor's in English. Going to school there wasn't as much as I thought it was, so I decided to follow my education and get my master's degree. So I got a master's degree in English also with a focus in children's lit.
Nice.
And from there, I decided that to make the most impact on my community, on the Black community, I need to be at the table actually when decisions are being made as to what money is going to go where.
Right.
I'd like to be allocated by the state, and so I went and got my doctorate. I was in a joint doctoral program at San Diego State and Claremont Graduate University. So I have a doctorate in education with a focus in teaching and culture. And that's what led me here today.
That's awesome. So, you're still there at SDSU right
yes,
now?
Yes, I'm at San Diego State currently. I'm the interim director at the CIR, which is Culture for Interrelational Relations at San Diego State, which is just a fancy way of saying all of the different nationalities of students on campus. Yeah. There's a particular place that they can gather and come and socialize and hang out and meet and just eat snacks.
That's cool.
Just to hang out. So that's pretty much.
I think that's cool because like when I was going to college, I didn't think they had much of stuff like that.
Yeah,
So,
with the Black Lives Matter movement, there's been tons of things that, at least at San Diego State, that I know of, different programs that have been implemented to actually try to ease the burden per se,
right,
or to try to make sure that students of color have a place where they can go and feel safe and express themselves. That's what's also led to the BRC at San Diego State, which is the Black Resource Center. So Black students have a particular place that they can go, even though they're always welcome to come to the CIR, but they have a particular place that they can go to just hang out with other Black students and be themselves. Because there's that famous saying where W.B. Wolf coined the term double consciousness, where we're one way with everyone else, but when we're alone and to ourselves, we're another way. So that's an outlet where Black students can just come and be Black students without being judged. Exactly. So, and different minority groups of students have that also. But there is one location where if you just want to come and hang out with just everybody, you can come to that location. So, but that's what it is.
That's cool. That's awesome. So I forgot to tell everybody what the topic of today is. Today's topic is going to be Black men and stereotypes. And so this is the perfect candidate to be on this episode with us today. I got a couple of questions I just wanted to ask you, but I'm gonna let you take the floor as well for different things you want to touch on. Sure. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, what would you say is like the biggest stereotype that you've dealt with personally?
Oh wow, the biggest stereotype that I've dealt with, I would say having different labels placed on me.
Okay.
Which I didn't deserve, which and not just me, but other Black males on campus. And I guess most of my experiences we'll talk about, we'll be dealing with just on college campuses, even though I have experiences outside of that I'll bring to the conversation as well.
Right.
But I can remember one thing that clearly stands out in my mind when it comes to stereotypes is I was in my master's program, And even in my undergrad and master's program, I was the only black student in there.
Yeah.
You know, it's that saying that if you want to hide something from black people, just put it in a book.
Put it in a book.
So I was the only black student in there, and every time I spoke, I felt like I was speaking for the entire culture of people. So I was always careful as to what I would say.
Right.
So at the end of this particular semester, there was this guy that was sitting in front of me. You know, we were all saying, because as a cohort, you go to different classes together.
Right.
Because you're going to end up in English classes again with someone that may have been in that class.
Right, right.
So this guy turned to me and said, Sam, I'm really glad that I took this class with you. You wasn't as bad as I thought you were going to be. And I thought to myself, what the heck?
What?
And I looked at him, and you know, of course, being double conscious,
Right.
in my mind, you know what I wanted to say.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I had to use the other face and say, could you please tell me what you mean by that?
Explain.
Yeah, exactly. And so he said, well, I was under the impression that the darker the skin of a black person, the meaner that they're going to be.
Wow.
But, you know, I could have went off and nutted up and came out the bag on it, but I saw that as a teachable moment.
Oh,
and
yeah.
again, I always try to be conscious of what I do and what I say in these classes because I'm the only black, because I don't want to give off some bad impression.
Right.
So I talked to the guy about, about stereotypes, and I was like, well, that's just not true. You know, that's people say stuff like that, but you have to actually get to know the person first, and, see what y'all have in common, and whatever y'all have, what differences you have, you talk about those, and you come to a mutual agreement of respect, and trust, and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
And he was like, wow, he's like, you're the first black person that I've really been around. He's like, when I come to class, I just come to class, do what we need to do in class, and I get in my car and I leave. And he was like, the neighborhood that I live in is all white, you know. So he wasn't raised around.
He didn't ever really be around them.
Not really be around them and stuff, social stuff where you would like maybe go to a grocery store or 7-Eleven or something like that. But yeah, I could have. So I saw that moment as a teachable moment, and that stereotype being placed on me. So I was thought to myself, this guy spent this entire semester, 4 months, thinking that I was really mean because of the color of my skin. But there was nothing that I said in class to give him the impression that I was like some mean dude. But that's how stereotypes are placed on black people. I have a friend that, he's pretty tall. I think he's like 6'5", and he walk around campus. Even with a couple of times when he's been with me, people will come up to him and ask him. When I say people, I mean people that aren't black, people that don't look like us, and ask, do you play basketball or do you play football? So there's that stereotype. Just because you gotta play basketball. So things like that happen. It happens often. And no matter where you are, microaggressions happens. Those kind of things happen, and I'm sure we'll get into that also. But to answer your question, that's one of the things that definitely sticks out in my mind is stereotypes that are placed on me that I don't deserve, or that I did nothing to cause that person to think that. It goes back to that saying where Henry Louis Gates talked about every African American male that walks out on the street in the United States of America has what Barbara Johnson calls an already written text.
Wow.
And that already written text, when you're a black man especially, walking out, being out in society. It's a text of being hypersexual, hypermasculine, being a super predator, which is what Hillary Clinton called us, sexually aggressive, that you're a beast, that you're lazy, that you're threatening, you're innately savage, animalistic, a criminal, and brutal. Those are some of the things that just comes automatically with you just being black. So we have to know how to combat that. There's a book called Changing the Atmosphere. I forget who's written by. But in order to change the atmosphere, for example, I'll give you an example. When leaving, because some nights my class didn't end until 9:50 in the different programs that I was in at San Diego State. So I'll be walking in my car at night, and if there's like maybe a white girl or white woman walking in front of me, I would take out my keys to make my keys jiggle so that she'll know I'm walking behind you. Or something to that effect, So we have to change the atmosphere to make it more pleasant and acceptable for us to be there. We shouldn't have to do that because we're just people. But again, those stereotypes are placed on us. Oh, you're black. You're gonna do something to me. You're gonna harm me. I'm a harmless little white girl. Stay away from me. Those kind of things. So And again, you know, those stereotypes of being a beast, being a super predator, being, you know, innately savage, all of that stuff is placed on us already. There are already pre-written text that comes along with us.
That's crazy. Pre-written text. That's a cool way to put it, because I definitely have had a lot of instances. Actually, something just happened to me and my cousin. This was probably, I'd say 3 weeks ago, and we went to a taco shop, and we were just hanging out, waiting for our tacos, and this guy comes and sits down, white guy. I think he said he was half Jewish, half Mexican, but he looked like a normal white guy. Came, asked me to sit down. He came and sat down, and it was cool for the first like 5 minutes, and then out of nowhere, this man just starts talking about, yeah, you know, it's already hard being black, you know. And then me and my cousin just looked at each other and like, we let that one slide, you know. Okay. But then he says, yeah, you know, because when you're black, you know, it's gonna be hard for you to get loans, you know, it's gonna be hard for you to do this, and this. He's just going off. This is right. He's sitting right here, and me and my cousin just looking at each other like, is he for real right now? Like, and so we just kind of we laughed really hard, because I see that our growth. Because had I been a little bit younger and someone came up to me and just started saying, oh yeah, you're black this, you're black that, and the guy kept just going on, and he would say, you know, like, you know, when you're living in the hood, and you know,
oh wow,
yeah, oh he was,
wow,
he looked at us like we were a couple of thugs, like he was telling us like, yeah, maybe you should figure out a trade to do, or because I told him. He was trying to. He was going in on us, and he was just literally saying all these things. And he's like, "Yeah, you know, because you guys just have to do better. You have to do better." Because he asked me what I do for a profession, and so he doesn't know that I have 3 degrees. But I told him that I do Uber Eats. That's my thing that I do right now, and I enjoy it. But he was saying, "Oh yeah, you can't survive off of doing this because you know when you're black, you know." Life is just hard, and you know you're trying to get out of the hood. You can't make it making the money you make. And I told him the money I make, and it just went in one ear and out the other. I was like, bro, you're not hearing anything I'm saying.
How old is this guy?
He had to be in his 50s.
Wow.
At least in his 50s.
Wow.
And you know he's telling us all the stuff we should do with our money. Which I was like, okay, I was listening to that part, but the rest of it, we just turned off by what he was literally saying to us about black, and literally just stereotyping us, calling us thugs, and like we live in the hood. I was like, I've never lived in the hood ever, you know, but it was just funny to see, like, there are people out here that will literally look at you and think that you're like this.
Exactly. That's those pre-written texts that I talk about.
Right.
These people automatically assume something about you because of this, because color of your skin, and that's it. You know, I try not to put myself into situations like that, because it's one thing to be on San Diego State campus when that's your job and you got to do your job and all that. Even though, you know, at this point, tons of students and faculty and staff know who I am, so I don't really encounter any of this now, and you know they see me in certain settings and all of that stuff, so it's pretty cool on campus.
Right.
And I'm not saying that it's like that for students, all of the black students, because they're not me on campus. Now, when I'm away from that campus, stuff like that, I definitely try to, well, I won't say stuff like that, people like that, I try to not encounter at all, because it's tougher for me, and I'm being honest with you on the podcast, it's tougher for me to keep my mouth shut when I'm not on campus.
Oh, I feel that.
So I make sure I avoid confrontation at all costs. Now, corner me, and I absolutely have.
What are you gonna do? You know, you have. You're not giving me any other option at that point.
And my thing is too, I hope the other person realize also I'm still a man.
Yeah, at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, I'm still a man now, so don't. So we'll leave it at that. So that stuff comes along with being black. It comes along with it. There's so many things, man, that we do as black people that there are people. I have this one white associate, and I'm always careful at the words that I use, so I call him an associate. I was at a friend's house at a pool party, and just a couple of us there. I forget what we were celebrating, but we were talking. We got on the subject about police, and we started talking about. And mind you, it's one person there that's not a black man.
Right.
He's, not black. He's white. So we got on the subject of police and started talking about how we feel when police are behind us, how, you know, of course we'll grip the wheel maybe tighter or in a different way.
Right.
And, you know, your heart rate changes and you get thinking, am I gonna go home alive out of this?
Right.
All of these different things that we experience as black men when police, and black women, I'm sure that they experience this as well. All of these things that we experienced, we started talking about, but he had no clue
No idea.
that we feel this way.
Wow.
Because he don't feel that
Right,
when he's around the top.
right.
And I started talking about the things that I had to teach my son, and so did some of the other guys. When you were raising these black boys and even black girls as well, the things that we have to teach our children on how to get home safe when you have an encounter with the police.
Right.
He had no clue about this. He
No
never
idea.
talked to his kids about that because there are certain things that white people just don't have to
They don't
do
have to
because
worry about
they're
that.
white privilege. you know?
Right, right.
So,
Yeah, I got another question for you. So you're not from here originally. You're from Mississippi. So how long did you live in Mississippi?
well, I was in Mississippi. I graduated high school literally on May 23rd, 1986, and by September I was on a plane getting out of there. I was 18 when I left
Okay.
Mississippi.
Wow.
So left Mississippi, went into the Navy, spent 12 years in Florida. Once I got done with boot camp and coming out to San Diego for A school, and I was sent to Florida.
Okay.
So I stayed there for 12 years.
What part of Florida?
I was stationed in Jacksonville, NAS Jack's Hospital.
Okay. Two hours north of where I
Yeah. Yep. And so once I was done with the Navy, I decided, okay, I don't want to re-enlist. That was just to get me a ticket out of Mississippi.
Okay.
So I have a job and a place to stay. And the
Right.
Navy supplied that, and I wanted to learn something else. So the Navy supplied all three of those. They taught me how to be a hospital foreman, so I have a background of working in the hospital.
That's
They
cool.
got me out of Mississippi, and I had a job where I was, and they supplied you food.
So it was like knocking out three birds with
exactly.
one stone.
So yeah, so I was in Florida for 12 years. Then I decided, okay, I want to leave Florida. Literally, I had started to see a change in Florida, and with the leadership. And when I say the leadership, I mean the governor, the mayors, this kind of thing. And I was like, well, I want to get out of here.
Yeah.
So then that's when I came to San Diego. So I actually moved to San Diego on August 29th of 1997.
Wow.
And so, and sometimes people are like, how can you be so excited with your date? My sister's birthday is August 28th, so
Okay.
the next day I left.
Literally.
Literally the next day I got on the plane and left. So I came to San Diego.
Okay.
And then I went back and I got my son and brought my son out here, and I raised my son out here.
Yeah.
My son went to Hamilton Elementary School right here in Fairmont.
Wow.
Then Far Middle School in Tierra Santa, then Sarah High School in Tierra Santa as well. Then
Yeah.
he was off to Tuskegee to college there.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been out here now. I think it'll be 25 years. I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere.
Right. So since you being here, I want to ask this: being here compared to like Mississippi, what would you say the difference is? Have you seen any like stereotypes here compared to Mississippi? Well, have you seen? What are the differences?
Oh man, there's a night and day difference. There's a night and day difference. There's a city here in California called Fontana.
Okay.
And I have a friend that used to live there, so I did some research on the place just to find out a little bit about Fontana before I went up there.
Right.
So Fontana used to be what's called a sundown town.
Okay.
A sundown town is a place where black people can go during the day and hang out and do X, Y, and Z. But at night, you have to be out of there.
Yeah.
Now, so California has that sundown town. The whole state of Mississippi is a sundown state. Black and white people and any other nationality, they get along during the day, but at a certain time, everyone separates and goes to their own corners and do what they're going to do.
Wow.
And then, and if you're not in your place, of course, stuff happens.
Yeah.
Fight, get beat up, get shot, get whatever.
Like anything goes.
Yeah, anything goes. So the whole state is like a sundown state. So when I go home to visit, because my family, number one, know I'm talkative. Number two, they know I'm going to speak up for what I believe in.
Absolutely.
My sister discovered this word, and she said, "Oh, you're a muckraker." I was like, "Okay, my sister knows a word that I don't know." So when I went and looked it up, yeah, I really am a muckraker. Someone that digs for the truth and finds the truth and exposes the truth. So my family, when I go home, they don't like for me to go to. I don't, go to Walmart or to the gas station or 7-Eleven. They don't. They want me to strictly be home. with them. All of the family members will come over to one of my aunt's house, wherever I'm staying, to visit. And, we'll go to church together and stuff like that. Anything in that neighborhood where I was raised, I can do stuff there. My family's cool with that. Yeah. But to say I'm going to go to Walmart or to a grocery store or to whatever, it's panic. Because they know if anyone says something to me the wrong way,
you're going to say something.
It's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So I try to make sure that when I go home to visit, I do go just to see my family. I don't want to cause disruption in what they have going on there, because I know what that state is like. So I strictly go home and visit my family. I get back in the car. I drive back to Atlanta from the 4 hours to Atlanta, get on the plane, and come back to San Diego. Yeah. So, but the culture there is totally different here. Here, when I leave here, I'm gonna go to the outlet and buy some shoes that I've been looking for. And do what I'm going to do. I go to the coffee shops and sit and hang out. I don't do that there because of the culture. There are certain people that expect you to say, I say yes or no, so when I feel like it. Even out here, of course I respect my elders and all that stuff. I say yes or no, so because that's how I was raised. But in Mississippi, it's a totally different thing. There are people that expect you to say yes or no something, and they'll stand there and stare at you and call you boy and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not cool with that. To me, that's a negative turn coming from certain people when clearly I'm a grown man. So don't call me boy.
That's like really condescending.
Yeah, it is, and I don't deal with that. And then to go home and have someone call me sugar. Well, sugar, what do you want? Or what can I do for you, baby? I don't like that.
You just call me what my name is.
Call me sir and be done with it. Or something to that effect, and then just be done with it. But I don't like those. I look at them as negative because of what I've learned. And I used to teach a class at City College called History from a Black Perspective. And man, once I got to digging into that stuff and finding out about different books to use for these classes and reading those books, it has you feeling some kind of way about everything.
So, being in San Diego, I know stereotypes are everywhere, but would you say it's lighter here compared to over there? Because I've talked to black people that live here before I moved out here, and they would always say, I visited and I didn't notice any type of racism or stereotypes or anything like that. People seem a lot nicer compared to where I was in Florida. But they're like, oh, it's still here. It's just a little bit more.
Well, and you used the key word. You said seem like. Seem like is when you say something is like something else. It's comparative. It's comparative thing. So in Mississippi, it's blatant. It's in your face. Out here, they're much slicker with it. They do what's called, and I spoke earlier, something called microaggression. Let me give a classic example of microaggression. It's when you go to Macy's, and I go to Macy's enough that's valid that they know who I am. But when these new people come on, I can tell when they hire somebody. 100% can tell it. So you're sometimes I'll try to put my card in the card reader so that because it has a chip to have it read the chip. And sometimes it won't do that. So I'll hand my card to the cashier. He or she would say, oh well, I can do it up here on top. So I hand them the card. They'll run the card, no problem. It goes through. They'll get the receipt and then they'll slide the card back to me on the counter.
Wow.
That's a microaggression. And I just stand there. And they'll say, is there anything else I can help you with? And I'll say, yes. I didn't slide my card on the counter to give it to you.
Hand it to me.
Pick my card up and hand it back to me.
As simple as that.
That's a microaggression. They do stuff like that, trying to be slick.
So you gotta watch for these.
It's really slick out here when they do the way that Californians operate. And I'm not saying it's all. I never say all because that's putting everybody in the same box. So, but there are some that are prone to doing microaggressions. And you have to call them out on it. I had a guy at Macy's also. This was back in 2019, Christmas 2019. I was buying pillows. Decorative pillows for them. They came in a bundle tied together. Even on the tag it said 2 and blah blah blah. So I just happened to pick them up and took them to the counter. I saw them. I liked them. I just picked them up. And then when they rang up, it rang up at a really discounted price. And the guy said, "This can't be true." And I was like, what do you mean? What can't be true? Like the price that these pillows rang up for it. So he cleared it out and he did it again. And he said, "There's no way you're getting these for that price."
What?
Looked at him. Number one, and this was at the home store in Michigan.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, I said, "So what are we gonna do here?" And he rang it again and he gave the same price. And I said, "Why don't we just go and call Fernando so that Fernando can come on and check me out." Fernando was the store manager. He knows me. I know him.
Right.
That's how often I'm there. So he came over. When he started walking up, he said, "Hey, Sammie, what's up?" I said, "That much man trying to get some of this Christmas shopping done." He said, "Oh, cool." He said, "What can I help you with?" And I said, "Well, the price that the pillow rang up for, your cashier told me there's no way I'm going to get the pillows for that price. So I just wanted to avoid the red tape and just have you come over and do this."
Right.
So he went back behind the counter. He looked at the guy. He gave the cashier a certain kind of look. And I knew what that looked like.
Yeah.
So he rang it up and said, "Hey, this is what the price is," and put the card in and paid for it and walked out the store.
Right.
So those things like that also, when they say, because he was implying that I had to have changed the price or did.
It's like, what are you? I walked in the store and got
Exactly. And so different stuff like that. They'll accuse you of something without accusing you of something. So you have to be careful with that. The microaggressions out here, they're slick with it.
Yeah.
So,
wow. Okay. I'll definitely be looking out for that. I will say I've seen some things, but that's crazy.
Oh yeah.
I want to go back to police. Would you say that you've dealt with any type of racial profiling when it's come to policemen out here or Mississippi or in Florida? Like, have you dealt with anything like that?
As a black man, definitely. I'm 53. I'll be 54 in July. So I've had plenty of encounters where police are asking. I remember one incident. I think my son was probably maybe 10 or 11. And I used to live on Wabash right here in North Park. And I was leaving the house that Saturday morning. My son and I was going to Kobe swap meet. So they pulled me over. I was in a blue Mustang, nice car. They pulled me over, and something had happened somewhere else in that vicinity.
Right.
And the guy was asking, "Well, where are you coming from?" I said, "I'm coming from home or headed to swap meet." And he was like, "You mind if I search your car?" I said, "Search my car for what?"
What?
And then he asked the next question, "Have you ever been to jail before?" Now my son is sitting right there, and you asked me all this stuff.
Wow.
I said, "If you want to call your supervisor over here, we can. I don't mind sitting here waiting." I said, "My son and I just left the house,
Right.
and you asked me this. I don't mind sitting here waiting until your supervisor comes over so that we can clear this up." So
Right.
I said, and then he would start telling me how something was happening in the area, blah blah blah. And I was like, "Well, that has nothing to do with me. What did that have to do with asking me? Have I been to jail and all this kind of stuff?" And you see, I have my son sitting
Right here.
and then I said, just so that you know, I use an H word. No, I haven't been in jail. I said, any other questions about jail? I've not been in jail. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. I don't do any of that stuff. So what else do you need to know?
Exactly. What
And
is
then he just stood there looking at me, and I told my son, I said, "Son, get your phone up, because what's on that phone?" I said, "And start recording this interaction right now."
Yep.
"Well, you have a nice day, sir." Tap my card for me. Just
Of course.
Well, just stupid stuff like that. Man,
I've dealt with something like that. I've been pulled over a lot of times in Florida. I can go talk about a whole bunch of different times, but the main one that really stuck out to me, I was working with one of my friends. She's a white girl named Melanie, and I worked with her. We did like janitorial work. This was like 7 and 8 years ago, and we were driving to one of the places we had to clean. We would switch off, and my car was the one we took this time, but I had a brake light or a headlight out. I think it was a headlight. And so we were driving, and I seen the cop turn and come out. He was coming to get me. I already knew I needed to get the headlight fixed. And so he pulls us over, and he said, "You know why I'm pulling you guys over?" And I said, "Because of my headlight. I know it's out, and I need to get it fixed." And I said, "I'm going to do it tomorrow." He's like, "Oh, okay. Well, while we're here, do you have any drugs in the car? Any weapons? Have you ever been arrested?" I'm like, and so she's sitting here, and she just like, "Is this real for real?" And so I'm like, "No," I said, like, "No." And then he says, "Okay, well, you mind stepping out of the vehicle. Like, oh, for what? And it's dark, you know. But I'm glad that she was there because she was able to see everything that was going on. She'd never seen anything like this before. And so I got out the car. He asked for my ID. I got all that stuff, and he said, "So you don't have any paraphernalia, nothing like that?" I was like, "No." He starts walking back, and he comes back. "Do you mind if I check?" I'm like, "You pulled me over for a headlight. What do you want to check my car for?" I was like, "Hey, you know, I'm not tripping. Go ahead, check. You ain't gonna find nothing." So he went in there. He was in there for about 20 minutes. And my friend Melanie, she just like heated. She just like, "I cannot believe they're doing this. This is BS." I'm like, "This is, you know, this is what happens. Like, this isn't the first time. Well, this is like probably one of the most aggressive times." And but then he gets back in this, you know, gives me back my stuff, and was like, "Oh, you know, we didn't find anything, but make sure you get that headlight fixed." Like, so you put me on for a headlight, but you wanted to search my car. And we get back in the car, and she was like, I had no idea. Like, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I didn't know like that kind of stuff happened. Like, yeah, it does. You know, being black, you know, and just existing, you know, these types of things happen. I've had multiple times that, you know, things like that happen. So
yeah, it is so unfortunate, you know, and I always think that, you know, guys that become cops, especially white guys that become cops, are those kids that was bullied on the playground, and now they got a badge to hide behind, and this is kind of crap that they're just trying to like, and they should not be cops at all, you know, because I've seen too many times, you know, when the cops go out and kill black people or brown people, and they, oh, well, I fear for my life. Or, well, if you're that fearful of people, you shouldn't be a cop.
You should not be a cop.
You should not be a cop.
It's to serve and protect. That's what the motto is.
Yeah.
And if you can't handle the pressure that comes with that badge, then what are you doing?
Exactly. And that's the thing too, man, because I've seen too many times where cops have shown up on the scene and escalated things and made things a lot worse.
Right.
Instead of making it better. So
right.
It shouldn't be cops. I always say, and I've said it a million times, there are certain people that should not be cops at all. We shouldn't allow them to be cops.
Right. No, absolutely. I totally agree. I have just like two other questions for you. What do you think is the biggest thing as black men that we face today?
Wow. I honestly, and I think it's the conversation that we just had. I'll say two things. One, I think the biggest threat that we face is, as a people, is white men in this country. Because if you look at all of the shootings, you know, there'll be a mass shooting, and then there'll be thoughts of prayers and crying, and you go through all of that. Then we'll get on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, having these debates. Then we'll talk about Black Lives Matter, and then we'll start talking about marching, and then everyone forget about what has happened. Then Congress won't do anything to act on any of this. They talk a good game, just like President Biden going yesterday and out to Buffalo, New York to meet with the families. We'll do all of that kind of stuff, and still nothing to happen with gun control. Then we wait for the next shooting. The next shooting happened again, and we start the cycle all over again. So as a people, as a black people, white men and these cops are our biggest threat. There was the mass shooting in Buffalo, New York, where there was 10 people killed. There was one in Biloxi, Mississippi, where there was 3 people killed. Houston, Texas had 2. Sacramento, California, the state capital here, had 6. We can't forget about Pulse nightclub, where there was 49 people that were killed. El Paso, Texas, 26. San Ysidro here, 20 minutes south of here, had 23 that was killed in a mass shooting. Newton, Connecticut, 26. Newtown, Connecticut, 26, with all the kids that was killed. Blacksburg, Virginia, 32. And also Las Vegas, where we have that big the killing where there was 60 people killed there. So gun control, you know, the guns, white men, and the police are the biggest threat to us as a whole, and to black men. I definitely think cops, policemen, white police officers are the biggest threat. And I won't even say just white men, it's white women as well, because there are white women that, oh, I mistook my taser for a gun. You don't do that. You just can't afford to do that.
You can't.
You know,
That's a life.
I think that's the biggest threat. But the biggest threat to America is homegrown terrorism and the white men that do this. You have a guy that's 18 years old. How do you become filled with that much hate
Really?
at 18 years old that you go out and kill 10 innocent people? One of the women had just left, the older lady, left the nursing home visiting her husband and stopped by the grocery store to buy groceries. And man, I promise you, she is, of course, my heart goes out to all of the family.
Right.
But her in particular, I literally had tears in my eyes because I thought it's a Saturday, this woman that just left visiting her husband, and now someone has to go and tell her husband that she got killed.
That's right.
That broke my heart, man.
That's right.
I'm telling you. And and I although I sit here and talk about my son, I just lost my son on February 22nd of this year.
Right.
So I'm still going through the grieving process myself. So, but seeing this, it just throws me back. Every time I make some progress and something happens, it just throws me back too. But that woman in particular, it just broke my heart.
It is something.
Now you got to go and tell someone that's got to go and tell the husband that she's deceased. You know?
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I can't even like trying to imagine that. Like you gotta feel so much anger, and hurt. It's like how did this happen? Why did this happen?
Exactly, man.
Yeah,
and they keep talking about on the news, especially on Fox, which Fox to me is just trash TV.
Oh,
It should be on TV.
Yeah.
They're already reaching for this excuse. Oh, he was mentally ill. Well, you can't keep using that.
You can't.
Come on.
Like
man.
you can only use that so much.
Exactly.
You know.
Anything to justify some white man coming along and killing a bunch of black people. Let's reach for this excuse that he was mentally ill.
Right.
That's out the window. We can't do that.
Can't.
But to have someone 18 years old filled with that much hate, thinking that their race is going to be wiped out. And that's what one of the women said I saw on YouTube TV also, is that's why, I'm sorry, it wasn't one of the women on YouTube. It was Dr. Tommy Curry from an interview from a TED Talk that he did on Monday with my friend Terry. And he said, why do you think they're going after Roe v. Wade to end abortions? So that their race could populate more, because they're afraid of becoming a minority, which they already are a minority in this country, but they're trying to do something about it. That's why they're going after Roe v. Wade right now, because they're thinking that they'll be replaced. And they keep using this term, original American, or I forget what kind of American, original Americans or rightful Americans, also is the term that they're using. Well, you're not a rightful American. That's the Native American people right here.
Exactly.
That's like me going down the street on El Cajon Boulevard in Texas and saying, "Hey, I discovered a McDonald's." Why can't you discover a place where there's already people?
It's already people.
So come on. So no, you can't keep doing that, man, and to keep saying that you're being replaced and all that, and you're fearful of that. That just has to stop.
Yeah, it has to. You couldn't have said it better. So moving forward, as a collective, what can we all do as a people to reduce the amount of stereotypes and kind of like raise awareness to people to see that this isn't, it's not okay. It's been going on for years, but what would you say is the best step forward to reducing the amount of stereotypes and how people are viewing us as black people?
Exactly. Man, that's a loaded question. That's a good question too. There are several things, that come to mind just off my head. Number one, I think it's going to make a huge difference to get out and vote. Voting is your number one weapon that you can use against some of this stuff. So getting out and vote, but also when it comes to stereotypes, an increase in college attendance. So I would call for African American people to educate themselves. Let's make sure that we're sending our kids to college, making sure they finish high school, whether they're learning a trade or whether they're going to college, making sure that they're doing something with themselves. So that is one of the ways that I would think that we can reduce some of this, and don't fall into stereotype when people automatically, if they call you, let's say, hypersexual, and you go out and try to have all of these babies and do all this, just don't do that.
Right.
Just let them think what they would like to think, but live your life and be the best person that you can be. And my thing also is, I think that it's important to have some kind of a connection with whomever you call God. Me, I know what I do. I'm a Baptist. I attend Grace Unity Baptist Church. I'm very active at my church, so that helps keep me grounded.
Right.
Now, whomever someone, and I'm not pushing my religion on anybody, I want anyone to get that impression. Whomever you pray to or choose to worship, whomever, that's totally up to you. But just get that spiritual connection. Yeah, and that's what helps me a lot.
Right.
There's been times where I wanted to say something that would have been considered aggressive towards someone, but I always sit there and think about what my pastor said a couple of Sundays ago, and so I try to keep that in mind. So going to church, having a relationship with God helps keep me grounded. And then we have to look at also what brought our ancestors this far, what our ancestors went through.
Right.
I had it on my Facebook page at one time. I'm my ancestors' wildest dream, and what that meant to me was being able to read, because they weren't allowed to read. They couldn't even, and even just being able to sit with you and speak English, because they put them on a slavery ship where all of the tongues were different. No one was able to really communicate. So we've learned to speak English. We've adapted to this land that we're in. We've adapted. We're working. We can come and go as we please. We're able to read. We're able to have jobs in colleges or doing whatever we're going to do.
Right.
We're able to walk down the sidewalk without having to jump off the sidewalk because someone white is coming along.
Right.
So all of these things, we're our ancestors' wildest dreams right now. They probably didn't even think that we'd be here still persevering through the things that we deal with.
Yeah.
They've dealt with some things that was horrible, and of course we still deal with some of those same issues.
Right.
Dr. Martin Luther King on August 28, 1963 delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech.
Right.
And at the end of that speech he said, "We shall overcome." And in a couple of papers that I've written and turned in at San Diego State and at City College also, and I always quote Dr. Martin Luther King said, "We shall overcome." And I put comma, but the question now is when?
Right.
Because we've not overcome yet.
Yeah.
We've not done that yet.
Exactly.
We're still fighting for equality. We're still fighting to have a seat at the table. We're still fighting for some of the things that some of our ancestors died for.
Right. It's like the abolishment of slavery wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, exactly. That dealt with the 13th Amendment, the abolishment of slavery. 14th Amendment dealt with the citizenship, where we can actually become citizens here in the United States, and the 15th Amendment dealt with the right to vote. So these are some of the things that some of our ancestors died for, and that we should be exercising.
Oh,
now, when we talk about the Declaration of Independence that was signed on July 4, 1776, it starts out by saying, "We the people of the United States." Now that "we" didn't include us being black people.
Right.
Didn't include us, because it was a bunch of white men sitting at the table writing this declaration.
Right.
It says, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union,
Right.
to ensure domestic tranquility." It went on to talk about all of those things that lined up with white men and white people, especially white men. But that "we" didn't include us. And it was proven, also back in 1896, where Plessy versus Ferguson, there was a case in Ferguson, Louisiana, where Plessy was 7/8 white and 1/8 black.
Wow.
So they went to court because he sat in the front end of the car of a train car that was for white people, and he said, "I'm not moving." And they said, "Oh yeah, you're gonna move." So they arrested him. He filed a case in court and go to court, and of course, we know the summary of that is the justice system at that time decided you still have to be separate but equal. If this car has X, Y, and Z, this car should have X, Y, and Z. But we know separate is never equal.
Exactly.
Never equal.
That's fact.
So that was that case of Plessy versus Ferguson. Also, we talked about, let's talk about the Dred Scott decision. The Dred Scott decision that came about in 1857, where this man was, and that was Scott versus Sanford. Also, his master at the time, quote unquote, had taken him to a state where black people were considered free. They stayed there, did what they wanted to do, all this kind of stuff, and then when it was time to go back, he was like, Mr. Dred Scott was like, oh no, I'm not going back. It's a free state. He said, well, Dred, it's time for, I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
He said, it's time to go, we gotta leave. He's like, nope, I'm in a free state. You can't tell me what. So they went to court.
Wow.
And so what happened in that case was pretty much, and I'm going to paraphrase, it was ruled that he is like a piece of furniture or a piece of property.
Wow.
And he can take and move his property wherever he wanted to, and he had to go back. So of course, white people loved that conclusion of that court case, and black people hated that because, you know, he was still considered property and not have any rights. So, so cases like that, the stuff that number one, our ancestors had to live through, but number two, it's like we're living these things over again in different forms. Yeah. So the racism has never ever gone away. It's always been there, and I don't take pleasure in saying this, but it's gonna always be there. As long as we have certain people here in the United States, we're gonna have racism.
Always gonna be here.
Because they're always going to inject it. It's always going to be there. And then I hear sometimes people will say, you know, even students that's been in my class, when they, of course they can speak freely, at least to the students that are non-black, minority students. They'll say, why does everything has to be about race?
Right.
And my simple answer, I said, you want the simple answer or the long answer? Oh, just give me the simple answer. I said, the simple answer is because everything is about race.
Yeah.
When we're dealing with them, everything is about race. Everything is about race.
That's true, though. That's very true.
Yeah.
You know, I think one of the main things that we could do, well, I think as for white people, people that are not black, would have to do, because racism is taught. It's definitely taught. It's not something that is just naturally in us anyway. And so I feel that, especially for the non-black viewers, teaching your kids and teaching those that are around you, we got to do better as far as not injecting racism into the new generations, because that's what really keeps it circulating.
Exactly.
That's what really keeps it circulating. And I'm still seeing videos resurface about areas of Texas where there's these high schoolers just blurting out the N-word and just saying, and I mean they did get dealt with, but it just goes to show you they're in high school and middle school, and they just think that's normal to just do.
Yeah, exactly.
And but it all comes back to that's what they've been taught. They've just been taught that. So I think moving forward, one of the best ways to combat that is going to be non-black people teaching those around their kids and peers or whatever. That's not okay.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I talk about with a group of friends, is that it's not up to black people or brown people or minority people.
Right.
We're not going to be able to change racism.
Yeah,
we
can't do that.
It's up to non-minority individuals to change that.
Right.
The systems that has been set up, the systems are doing exactly what they're designed to do. Even with the education system, it's designed to keep certain people out of the education system and only let us select few in. And when I say that, there's only like 3% of black women that has PhDs. I didn't know that until my friend Melanie, 3% are awarded to black women. Yeah. I didn't know that until my friend Melanie, that lives up in LA, she graduated, she got to walk with Columbia Graduate University this past Saturday. I went to her graduation party, to her graduation and everything. And we just happened to be talking, and we pulled it up to find out that only 3% of those degrees are awarded to black women. So what happened to the other women that apply, black women that apply for the program and don't get in? So the system is designed to keep certain women out and put certain in. Now, when it comes to the policing, there are certain people that are part of that system and certain people that aren't. Imagine what the policing system would look like if all of the policemen, let's say, was black or minority.
Right.
We have a totally different.
A whole different scenario.